Hello, everyone, and happy Wednesday. I hope you all are doing well. We're happy to have you today for today's session entitled Building a Culture of Savings, Reframing the Narrative to Champion Children's Savings Accounts. Really excited to have our spotlight organization as well as our featured presenter along for this ride with us today. So I'm going to do an overview of some quick housekeeping rules or guidelines, and we'll jump into today's conversation. So, many of you may already know me. My name is Olivia Harp, and I'm the program manager for network building here at Prosperity Now. Um, just a few things to keep in mind. So, please note that webinars will be available via Prosperity Now's YouTube channel in the coming weeks. And so, if you just visit our YouTube channel, you'll be able to catch up on all of the other webinars that we've posted, as well as this one. We've switched to Zoom, so if you have any technical issues, please visit either this link on the screen or you can email us directly at zoomwebinar@prosperitynow.org. You're all muted to ensure sound quality, but we want you to use that Q&A box to communicate with us throughout today's learning opportunity. So you can provide any questions that you have for our featured speaker, or you can share best practices, anecdotes, reflections. We want to hear it all. We want today's learning opportunity to be as engaging as possible. And for that reason, we really encourage you to join from a quiet space, get really, really comfy, grab a snack, some coffee. Again, use that Q&A box whenever you deem it necessary. We want to hear everything that you have to say today. We want you to reflect on ways to apply what you learned today to your own work. And so here at Prosperity Now, our mission is to inspire bold action and provide organizations with the tools, research, and resources needed to help people build prosperity so that everyone can thrive. And so we are going to jump straight into today's presentation from Ikram Koliso. She is the Interim Director at the Office of Financial Empowerment in Saint Paul, Minnesota. So Ikram, feel free to engage everyone. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role and how you approach this work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Olivia. Good afternoon. I hope everybody is having a great day and week so far. So my name is Ikram Koliso. I'm with our Office of Financial Empowerment at the City of St. Paul, and I've been with our Office of Financial Empowerment since before I even started. Previously, I was in the Office of Mayor Melvin Carter, kind of helping with the development of our college savings account program that we went through a community process to design, and then also some of the initial design phases of what a future Office of Financial Empowerment could look like. And now we've been around for a little over 5 years, and it's been super exciting with all the different types of work that we've done. And our work encompasses our Cornerstone program, which is CollegeBound Saint Paul, which is our college savings account program. We've also done a couple of guaranteed income pilot programs, which are also connected to our college savings account programs. We do some work around shared ownership. So how do we create worker-owned businesses or support worker-owned businesses already in our community, as well as community-owned entities as part of that community wealth building. And we also do some work around tenant protections and policies for both tenants and landlords. And we also do other work like wraparounds around financial health and child well-being. And so we have a financial health network of organizations that we've been working with since we launched to kind of help inform a lot of the work that we do. And then on a personal level, I studied public health and social work. And so since I was younger, I've always wanted to do something that both encompass macro and micro to help inform the work that I was doing. Because oftentimes when we're in those spaces, we tend to just be in those silos. And so we know that the lived experiences of people has an impact on policy and vice versa. And so how do we make sure that we are bringing that together into the Office of Financial Empowerment and the work that we do? I've been able to do that because we're on the ground meeting with community members day in and day out, while we also work with policymakers to help ensure that the policies that we are implementing are best meeting the needs of our community members. And I'm here to share a little bit about our college savings account program in particular. So Olivia, when you want me to jump in, I'm happy to do that with our slides. Thank you. So CollegeBound Saint Paul is our college savings account program that we launched January 1st of 2020. And so even though we launched January 1st of 2020, the work started way before that. And so we had a community design process. You can go to the next slide that we brought together cross-sector stakeholders to help design our ultimate program that we ended up launching. And so there were some key elements of our CSA task force. It encompassed over 50 people that came from cross-sector organizations to help design every aspect of the program from eligibility to outreach and engagement to the type of account vehicle we would use. How do we make sure that the program is sustainable and accessible? And how do we make sure that it's embedded within the community and the institutions that already exist that families have that trust and rapport with? And so those members were part of four different subcommittees that really helped design some of those key elements. And then in addition to that, we did family engagement and focus groups to really get to the nitty-gritty of figuring out what type of bonuses or incentives families were most excited about or that they thought were most accessible. And so all of the learnings that we got from the family engagement and focus groups, as well as the community institutional partnerships focus groups that we did, is what we took and had in our final recommendations report, which that image that you see right there is the picture of the front cover. It's almost 100 pages, so it's a pretty long report. But when the program started being administered out of the Office of Financial Empowerment, we pretty much took that report and implemented it because it was the key decisions that the community had come to. And then big shout out to Prosperity Now, which was our technical assistance provider that we worked with at the time. And so just grateful for their continued partnership over the years. Next slide, please. So, after going through the design process, which this was in 2018, we went through an implementation process. And so the final key design elements that we came to for our program is that there would be a $50 seed deposit that would help jumpstart the savings for our participants. And then we were going to be partnering with Bremer Bank, which is a local financial institution here. There was a lot of discussions on how do we choose the account vehicle for the program. We talked a lot about 529s and a custodial savings account. And for us, a key value of the program was accessibility. And so based on that and through a ton of discussions and also engagement sessions, we learned that a custodial savings account is what makes the most sense. So that's the design that we went through. And what it means is that the city is the custodian and the children are named the beneficiary. And then in terms of eligibility, we do have universal eligibility. So we are the first city in the nation to have universal eligibility that also starts at birth. So it's for all babies that were born on or after January 1st of 2020 and that are St. Paul residents. And so it doesn't really matter where they're born, as long as they're a St. Paul resident at some point, by the time they start elementary school, they would be eligible for the program because we know that, families move in from other places as well. And then it is automatic enrollment for the most part, and we use birth records from the Minnesota Department of Health. And then we do also have some aspects of it that are manual enrollment. So for example, if families are moving into the city or for birth records that are not accessible. And then the flexible use of funds, the way that we decided on that, and part of what helped us design the account vehicle is also that we knew that it was going to be important to be flexible with that. So it's post-secondary education and the related expenses that includes community education, nonprofit classes, vocational school, or any certificate that that young person would want to receive at the time. And so when we say college, we mean anything after high school that helps them advance their future. Next slide, please. So currently we have over 17,000 babies and toddlers that are enrolled in the program, and they have over $3.5 million in savings. And our highest account is over 13,000 right now. And we recently launched CollegeBound Elementary because our oldest participants entered pre-K last fall and they're entering kindergarten this year, which is so incredible because we've been with them since birth. And so just the journey of seeing them grow up has been really incredible. And so we've worked on embedding it within the school infrastructure, which I will be sharing more about. And then that's just a heat map of where all of our participants live within the city. Next slide, please. So for CollegeBound Saint Paul, it was really about thinking beyond the initial deposit. So the initial $50 deposit is amazing, but it is a seed. And so there were other aspects that we wanted to make sure that was a part of it. And the way that I see it is that our CSA program is it's a channel, it's a tool to help us connect families to early childhood programs and services, as well as family financial health programs and services. And then there's also been the integration of the guaranteed income programs. But along those lines, there's also the additional bonuses that families can get, which is we have a pretty robust bonus infrastructure where families can get bonuses for engaging with the program. So log into their savings portal or participating in the different programs that we host, as well as for milestone bonuses. So like a first birthday bonus, or if you opted into the program, you get a bonus for that. And then now with the elementary phase, there's a number of grouped bonuses that are also connected to that. So it's really about that cradle to career, cradle to college supports and milestones that are available for the students. Next slide, please. And then another really key thing for us, and I think what makes us really unique is the community embeddedness. And so when we were initially designing the program, we knew that it was going to be really important to make sure that we were integrating within the current infrastructure that we already have in the community because the families already, have that relationship, have that trust, and have those partnerships with organizations. And so how do we make sure that we're building on that and not creating a whole host of other new things that families have to do? Because we know that families are really busy. Oftentimes, the families that we're trying to reach the most, their parents may already be working, or caretakers may already be working multiple jobs. And so it's going to be really important that we really take advantage of places and spaces that they already are. So we do family deposit days with our financial institution partner quarterly, and that has also been super successful. It really shows that, we have new families that come into quarterly deposit days. We have returning families, and families within, just a few hours end up making thousands of dollars in their deposits in their children's accounts. And that really goes to show that that engagement is really great, but also helps build community amongst, the college-bound families. And you see some pictures of some of our deposit days on this slide. We also have Money Action Day that we host annually, which is an event where we bring together community partners and also city partners. There's a resource fair, and then there's also financial health workshops where families can participate in. They can get a credit check. They can get participate in workshops on like budgeting or home, buying a home for the first time, starting a business for the first time, and then a ton of fun activities for the whole family. And our next one is actually next weekend, so we're really looking forward to that. We've also been doing a community baby shower, and that also is an annual event. It started off as a drive-through community baby shower in 2020 because, of course, right after we launched, COVID also started. And so we had to get really creative around that. And that was an idea that was actually brought up by one of our community ambassadors. And then we have our enrollment and referral partners, such as WIC, for example, which is one of our strongest partnerships. They help us get word out about CollegeBound. They have it actually integrated on their form. So as they're talking to families, families also get to hear about CollegeBound Saint Paul. And then when we get those referrals from WIC, we can make sure that we're giving them some of those additional bonuses. We have two empowerment bonuses, which are child well-being and financial health bonuses. And so as families are taking their children to well baby checkups or doing early childhood screening or things of that sort, they can get $50 every single year. And same for when they're doing things related to their family's financial health. And so with those, having those partnerships is really important because when we get data from those partners, it just helps remove the barrier of families having to, always let us know and verifying that they've gotten that because oftentimes we can get that data directly from the partners. And then it's also a mutual thing, right? So it's great that the partners can help communicate out about CollegeBound and encourage families to engage with their account and engage with the programming, but also it gives them an opportunity to talk to families about thinking about their children's future and planning and saving for that, which is a mutual benefit. Because a lot of the times with all the different organizations, we're all trying to do the same thing of supporting our families and supporting our youngest ones. And so there's different pathways that we do that. And so just realizing that it's a mutual aspect is really important. And then we do have our community ambassadors program, which are community members themselves that help get the word out about the program. And so we also have incorporated leadership development for them so that they also, develop themselves as leaders, and they are true champions of the program. And they'll be on at the playground or grocery store and see families with a baby or stroller, and then make sure to ask, "Hey, are you part of CollegeBound? Do you know about CollegeBound? Let me tell you about it." Next slide, please. And then the next thing is just sharing a little bit about our College Bound Elementary. As I shared, our oldest participants are now in the schools. And so we went through a process where we worked with the St. Paul Public Schools as well as other college access programs to help design College Bound Elementary, which is about integrating College Bound within the actual schools. This is the first time that we have an opportunity to actually directly, talk to the students. And so through the elementary years, we'll be able to reach over 15,000 students, and they'll be able to earn at least $350 in their elementary years by doing things like in-school deposit days and participating in a number of activities like field trips to the colleges and universities or to the bank branch. And then another big aspect of that is, and so that's our college savings account boosting savings aspect. And then we have the college and career readiness, which is about building a college going culture. And so there'll be prompts that will be available for both children, students, and also their families and caretakers on prompts on college and career readiness and thinking about your future. And then the last big aspect of our elementary programming is whole family wealth literacy, which is workshops that will be available that are, trauma informed, because we know that when it comes to finances, like there's the way that the systems have been set up, it's always been a disadvantage to a number of our families. And so how do we make sure that we are building workshops that are informed in a way that our families can best benefit from that. So those workshops will be provided to both parents and also caregivers, as well as some after-school programming on financial education that students can participate in. And you'll see a couple of pictures here. The top one, which is our family deposit day that we did for the elementary schoolers. And then the one below that is Mayor Carter attending one of their in-school deposit days. We just completed them at all of our almost 40 elementary schools. And then the other picture of one of our young college-bound participants. Next slide, please. And so in the design phase and as we launched and now in implementation, I think sustainability and durability is something that has been a key thing that we've had to think about. This is a great program. We know that it will make a difference, but how do we really make sure that it's sustainable? How do we really make sure that we are able to not just make it a great program for our current participants, but for our future participants down the road? And so we thought about what are the financial implications. And so we've had a campaign that we've been working on to raise enough funds to help sustain the program for years to come. And then there's the political aspect of it, right? Being that we're in government. And then how do we make sure that it is, there's the community embeddedness. And now the way that it's embedded in the community is to the point that if somebody ever comes along and tries to take it away, it's not going to work, because community members are going to be like, no, this is the thing we love, we built it, and it's a part of us now, and it's a part of our community's DNA. And then the institutional embeddedness as well as program implementation systems. And this is something that we're constantly thinking about, so it is a revolving door. Next slide, please. I think this is our last slide, and then we'll get into some questions. And so the other key thing is that, we feel really great about where our program is, the progress that we've made in the first few years, and where we're headed. But a big part of that is also about building the ecosystem for CSAs to thrive, starting within our state. And so we have been providing some technical assistance and TA to a number of communities here in Minnesota that have been selected to receive planning grants to help design their own CSA program, which they went through, and it was incredible, which shows that there's appetite for other communities, both both in our state and across the nation that are interested. And so helping them, provide that support and then making sure that it's connected to their community goals. And then overall thinking about how do we make sure we have a statewide program that local programs can integrate into. So that's the end of the presentation. So I'll pause there. And then I think we will have some questions and conversations to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing it. I feel like you gave such a comprehensive overview of everything that you do. I'm like, I don't even know if there's anything left to discuss, but in true Prosperity Now fashion, we have tons of questions to ask you for this next segment, which is going to be our fireside chat. And I highly encourage all of our attendees on today's call to also submit questions as I'm asking questions too. You have a few hearts coming up. I see amazing, wonderful presentation. Really good to learn a lot more about what you're doing in this world and this realm. So I'm just going to just like kind of start with a question that states the obvious. So you've played a pivotal role in launching this college-bound program. Can you share a little bit more about not only what inspired the creation of the program, but what did those early stages of design look like as it relates to community engagement? What was your approach? What was your mindset?
Thank you so much, Olivia, for that question. So I think a big part of it is that it was inspired by the vision that, St. Paul as a city, that we care about our children, as a community, we care about our children and we care about their futures and we care about families. And so it's really about the vision of St. Paul as a city where every child has a real shot at college or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and future prosperity. And then I think another big part is that, Mayor Carter has been a big champion of this program, and kind of putting the vision out there. And then the community responded. Like in his inaugural speech, when he talked about this was the thing that people were the most excited about. He was getting text
Mhm.
messages before he was even done with the speech to say, hey, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of, those conversations. And so I think, Mayor Carter and the way that he thinks about equity, and to invest in long-term solutions that start at birth. And the other key thing is that we understand how critical the early years are for development, for kindergarten readiness, and that's kind of the early childhood space that, which is why we started at birth, because we know that we want to really take advantage of those few years. So how do we make sure that early childhood screening gets done at age 3 rather than at age 5 when students start kindergarten, when there could have been so many things that we could have done for them, in those, 2 years prior. And so it's really about using this as a channel, as a tool to help connect to broader resources. And then we created the task force, which really worked on those four subcommittees, but it was to ensure that it was a community-centered design. And then the early engagement also included like the listening sessions that we did, the focus groups, the institutional partner meetings to make sure that the design reflected the real needs and aspirations of the community overall. And we weren't just thinking about what are the individual level outcomes of like those young people for, years down to come, but also the overall community impact and outcomes that we can see, not just in 18 years to see if they end up going to college, but also in the interim to see that more students are ready for kindergarten, more students are doing their early childhood screening earlier, and more families are getting connected to some of the amazing resources that we have here in the Twin Cities. And so that's why we have the two cornerstones of connecting to child well-being and family financial health programs and services. And so a lot of times, there would even be questions of, well, how do we know that this program works? Because we're not going to know anything for 18 years. And there's so
Mhm.
many things that happen in the interim that we will be
Yeah.
able to see some of those outcomes and like really paying attention to that and like building our program around that. Yeah, pause there.
No, that's really important. And full transparency, my background is in youth development. So I always get the warm and fuzzies whenever I have conversations like that, because a lot of times we do start to measure young people's outcomes post 18, but they're making strides for those entire 18 years. In fact, what they do before 18 is the foundation for their success afterwards. And so I was really excited to also hear that it's not just college that you all are willing to fund, correct? Like it's whatever educational or career related aspect relates to their overall well-being and financial empowerment. But we'll probably have to have that conversation for another day. I want to stay seated in community because it's very clear that your program is deeply rooted in community, and not only deeply rooted in community, but community kind of is the decision maker or the overarching decision maker for your program activities. So how did you approach centering community voices? And you talked a little bit about, well, a lot about your events and how protective community members are of this program. But can you share a little bit more about how this community-centered approach has also shaped other forms of success?
Yeah, definitely. So when it came to designing the program, right, we didn't just ask for feedback. We didn't just sit in City Hall and design a program and then, brought us to the community and said, hey, this is what we're doing. We really built community voices into the design, into the launch, into the user experience testing, into the governance and the implementation and the administration process of the program. And so it wasn't really something that was a check mark where of like, okay, well, you talk to community, right? It was the community actually helped design every aspect of the program and how do we make sure that families are going to be able to trust it and know that when they hear about this, it's something that they can trust. And so I think a big thing is that in OFE in general, a number of the things that we've done, sometimes, families may hear about it and they're like, no, that's a scam. Like that's not real, right? But it's very much real. And so when we have, champions and trusted messengers that are helping get the word out, that really truly makes a difference. But even just the realization of like we're using government to do good, and if people are seeing the things that we do as a scam, like it just goes
Mhm.
to show that we government hasn't always, had the interest of community members at its center. But I think the way that we've been able to do it, where communities have been engaged since the beginning and continue to be, is really critical because then they can always help us kind of refine it and be in an iterative process. And so partnering with trusted institutions such as WIC, for example, or the libraries or, the birth centers and the clinics to serve as enrollment and referral hubs has also been really key because those partners, also know that the needs that families have, but they are also directly connecting with families. And so just that continued voice that we also get from the partners. And then we've also been able to create different things like the Family Deposit Days and the Community Ambassadors Program as a way to kind of help build that local ownership and also help amplify peer-to-peer outreach because we know that families are going to jump to something where it's somebody that looks like them, that speaks their language, that's directly from their community telling them, rather than maybe somebody who isn't. And so that's been really key. And I
Mhm.
think another thing is that because of the partnerships that we have, for example, with like Head Start, even when we were doing enrollments things for like our guaranteed income program, which is connected to our college savings account program, I was enrolling a number of families that told me they're like, oh, I got a poster and I got a letter, and I got an email, but I didn't really look too much into it. And then I was in my Head Start parent class, and then my teacher talked about it. And she was like, and I got on it right away. And so just to make sure that the messages are coming from different angles, and then those key messengers really being critical and I think that will help kind of the long-term success of the program as well. And then I think obviously, the community baby shower events, the money action events, and a number of them help families continue to engage and stay informed while also like building community amongst one another, right? Because this is a program that starts at birth, oftentimes it's a lot of new parents. It's a lot of, and every baby and every child is different, right? The experience is different, but just for them to have community amongst each other where they can share advice and share information and share resources amongst each other, I think is also another beautiful element. And then our result of having over, 17,000 babies and toddlers enrolled and over $3.5 million saved, like that's community trust has translated into strong participation and momentum that we've been able to build.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times, whenever we talk to different organizations about services that they're providing in their surrounding communities, the first reaction is like, it's too good to be true. It's too
Right.
good to be true. And so naturally, you have to start with the trust building. And so incorporating all of those different trusted spaces are important, but also keeping one leg in the different systems and places that also affect their everyday life along with your program. And so, Ikram, you've worked across both city government and health systems. So, how have those experiences shaped your perspective on economic mobility, as well as the role that this plays in CSAs?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the beautiful things, and that I think I also tend to have an eye on, is like seeing the intersectionality of things, or how things are connected, or how things can align, which is just always like fireworks in my head. And so I think, just with the background of like public health and passion for social determinants of health, that also always shapes like how I, and also all of us, view economic opportunity, which is also a foundation for well-being. And so, working both across government and healthcare, it reveals how upstream interventions are critical to breaking the cycles of poverty and improving health outcomes. And even when we get to the point of intervention, that's already kind of down the road, right? We want to get to the point of
Mhm.
prevention. And so that's really the place to start. And so through a program like this where we're starting earlier, it really helps make sure that some of those conversations are taking place, not just within the community, but also within households and amongst, parents and caretakers and their young ones. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, and then economic, precarity shows up in our healthcare system, every single day. Families are delaying care, or struggling with bills, or navigating a lot of chronic stress, right? And so preventing a lot of that also starts early, right? And so when we can, as a community, come together as a collective and say, hey, we're in this together, like we're helping your family and we're helping your young ones just kind of think about the future, like hopefully that will be able to help relieve some of those stressors long term. And we know that from like the CSA research that's been done, that, those are some of the social emotional outcomes that also is that has been found within the CSA programs. And then in city government, we've been able to embed, equity into systems design. And one of the things that we recently did with the Office of Financial Empowerment is erasing medical debt for a number of our St. Paul residents. And so we're working with healthcare systems. We did our first purchase of healthcare with from debt last November, where we were able to erase almost $40 million in debt that families have
Mhm.
for, over 32,000 residents. So we're hoping to do more of that. And so that's kind of another angle that we work on within the Office of Financial Empowerment, kind of looking at the family holistically. And then I would say overall, like CSAs, they're a powerful tool, and they're at this intersection of health and wealth. And they're not just like financial assets, but they're also psychological anchors, and that shifts future trajectories and like building that community resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell that like the more that you delve into this work and think about this work and even just interact with community, you realize just how connected everything is, even if they seem so far away from the actual subject matter at hand. And so while it can often feel daunting it seems like a new space pops up every day that you have to engage to ensure that this work is successful. But that's the bread and butter of systems change, right? Like reaching out across and bringing all of these sectors into one place, into one issue area, so that you can advance, um, well, champion CSAs in this
Exactly.
instance.
I'm so glad you said that. Exactly. It's like I've always said, like everything is like an ecosystem. Like everything works in an
Mhm.
ecosystem. Everything is interconnected. So we can never think about anything in isolation, right? So absolutely.
Yes. And so I'm going to switch gears just a little bit to talk some about narrative change. That's what we're here for today. And after everything that you've said, I'm sold, but I've been sold on CSAs and this work. That's a part of the reason why we're here today. But I'd like for you to share a little bit more about what stories have been most effective in shifting public perception and building support for CollegeBound Saint Paul.
Yeah, definitely. Great question. And I think narrative change, that's really important. And we have to make sure that that's, embedded in the work that we're doing in terms of, some of that perception that's out there. But I think one of the key things is that stories of families who didn't believe they could save, but now proudly deposit money alongside the city deposit and some of the bonuses that the city provides. And so even when you start talking about, CSAs in general, oftentimes usually there's a response of, a lot of families are barely able to make ends meet now. So how is it that they can think about, their child's future education or college? And there is space for that, right? Where it's like, and that's where our guaranteed income came in, where it's like, well, this is a way for us to be able to help meet the needs of families now, but also the aspect of asset building, which helps us think about, that child's future and their education. But now in general, just seeing that families are able to save when they thought that they couldn't is, that's like proof in the pudding. And then, we do have a family who has over, $13,000 in their account, which I think is also another proof of possibility, and a number of families that consistently come to our deposit days and consistently also bring their young ones along to continue to engage and take advantage of all that the program has to offer.
Mhm.
And then when it comes to, the family deposit days, you'll see families attending with their grandparents, godparents, like their great grandparents. And so you'll see generations of
Yeah.
the baby and, all the way to great grandparents. And I think that also shows that it's legacy work and that, families truly want the best for their children, and this helps them kind of get there. And then I think the other thing is changing the narrative from like college is too expensive to we start saving from birth because we believe in our
Mhm.
children. And so with CSAs, it's not necessarily to say that, at least with a custodial savings account, that the funds are going to be able to help cover all of college because we know that that's very expensive. But we do know that research tells us that if families are from lower to moderate income households and they have just even less than $500, they're 3 times more likely to go to college and 4 times more likely to graduate, which we can't know that data and not do anything with it, which is what Mayor Carter says. But also,
Yeah.
when there's all the wraparound that comes with that, we know that, those outcomes are going to be, blown really even out of the water. And so it's really about we as a community, we're coming together, we're thinking about your children and your family's future. And it's possible, right? It's possible to start somewhere when you start earlier than when you're trying to do it last minute down the road. It only becomes harder every single year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really beautiful story to share because sometimes the best thing that you can do for someone is just get them closer, make them realize that they're closer to the possibility than they think. And just planting that seed, if you plant a seed, it'll grow, right? So we're saving from birth. And so not only does the money grow, but the possibility of going to college or participating in post-secondary career development or educational development, that grows as well. And once that grows for 18 years, oh, you're definitely going. You're definitely going to take that leap and plant those seeds for economic mobility, not just for yourself, but for your entire family that was involved in the process from the beginning.
Yeah, and just to add on to that as well, absolutely. And I think a big part of it is sometimes just the account itself, right? So the way that our program is set up is that when we get the birth records, like we open the account, it's automatic enrollment. And then by the time the family hears from us, they're receiving a
Mhm.
welcome kit with their account card and everything like that. So
Yeah.
they can start engaging right away and log into the system, into the savings portal. And so sometimes it's the opening the account that's the barrier for the family that they might like put off. But when we do all the groundwork and say, here's your account card and here's what you can already start engaging, it just helps them really be able to hit the ground running and helps remove some of those initial barriers that we know exist for a lot of our families that, are busy and are, working multiple jobs and have a lot to get a handle on. And I think the other thing is that for our program, obviously it's for children born in 2020 and after. And so you might have families that have older siblings, right? Well, how about my other kid? They can have a college savings account, but we do hear that families say, okay, well now I'm considering opening a savings account for my other child, right? Because they
Yeah.
see that it's possible, they see that it could be tangible, and so it really helps create a ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we're talking about narrative change, while the story that we tell is important, the way that we get the story across is important too. So I do want to ask you, like, what messaging or outreach strategies have resonated both with families and community leaders in St. Paul?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first one is like simplicity and possibility, right? Simplicity plus possibility. So $50 at birth, a future that starts now. And then all the different bonuses that they can use to like that they can build over time. But it's a seed, right? Like you said, and the seed grows. And then I think the other key message that really makes a difference both for our community, our families, funders, policymakers, is that we as a community are coming together to help our youngest plan and save for their future and their aspirations. And then the other is that CSA is a tool to help connect to other programs and services related to child well-being and family financial health. So like in the world where somebody is like, oh, I'm really not even interested in a CSA program, I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure they're interested in their child's development and their well-being and their
Yeah.
own family's financial health and being able to get connected to the resources at whatever varying levels that they need. And so it's bigger than that. It's thinking about the whole family. And then I think the other really key thing is like culturally rooted engagement. So tailoring messages for multilingual and multi-generational audiences. We work, closely with a lot of our culturally specific organizations and did a lot of advertisements and, radio ads and things like that that would be in the different languages to like really be able to reach all the populations that we want to reach, which we have such a beautiful, diverse community here in the Twin Cities in St. Paul. And so we want to make sure that the messages are reaching everybody that they need to reach. And then I think one last other key takeaway is trusted messengers. So outreach, via WIC, community ambassadors, the schools now, and any other community partners that are really hearing directly from some of those trusted sources. And then I think a key takeaway that I would like to share is build on what already exists, right? So to tap
Mhm.
into the trusted networks and make it personal, not transactional, and that will take you a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And our questions are coming in really quickly in the questions box before we even ask. So I don't want to take up a lot of time. I'm going to ask maybe two more questions and then we'll head straight into our audience engagement. And so what do I want to get into? Like there's so many questions that I have, but that would be selfish for me to go ahead. So um I'm going to ask for CSA programs who are just getting started, right? Who are just starting to think about how they're going to engage the community, how they're going to reach out, and what that looks like. Are there any lessons learned that you would share with programs that are just getting started with connecting with the community?
Yeah, I would say I think the biggest lesson is that you want to bring, you want to bring the community along. So you want to bring cross-sector organizations and perspectives together as well as community members. And so they can help you kind of, set the tone for how is this going to best meet the needs of our community. And then having that buy-in early on is going to really
Mhm.
help the success of your program down the road because you're going to need partners, you're going to need people to get the message out, you may need a financial institution, you'll need so many things down the road. And if you have people kind of across the board that already helped build this program, it'll make it that much easier. That's something that we did like unintentionally that ended up being so helpful for us. And so
Mhm.
that's one big one. And then I would say, yeah, use community voices as kind of the anchor for being able to get that done. And then I think the other key thing is connecting your CSA program to your community goals, right? So I think the CSA is a tool and a channel that can pretty much be connected to a lot of the different goals that different communities have. And so when
Mhm.
you kind of make it aligned to what the community is already wanting to do and like build on that, then I think it makes it that much easier versus people seeing it as just kind of the standalone thing. And they feel like, well, there's all these other things that we want to do though that are really important and that are critical. In a lot of cases, the CSA can fit into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned buy-in because we know that when we're doing this work, human-centered design, community-centered design is essential. But when we're talking about buy-in, data is king for a lot of people. So, how do you balance qualitative data and lived experience when making the case for these kinds of programs?
Yeah, definitely. I think, when it comes to data, right, it proves what's possible. So for us, we have over 17,000 enrollments. We have millions of dollars saved so far. But the lived experiences, they make the case undeniable, right? Seeing mothers and fathers and grandparents and caretakers and youth sharing their why and that, they have aspirations, they have hopes and dreams. And so that's kind of where that lived experience comes in. And then we center also, families sharing their experiences. And now we're at the point where a lot of our community ambassadors are actually college-bound families themselves. And so being able to kind of lean in on some of those testimonials along with, general program reporting of like what the actual numbers are. And so that we're able to reach both, hearts and minds as well. And I think both are obviously really important for evidence for, funders and policymakers and the broader public. But a lot of the times, like the human lived aspect of it is the thing that's most undeniable. And everybody wants our youngest to do well, right? Like
Yeah.
nobody's going to say, no, I disagree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to move into audience Q&A. And so while the audience has questions for you, we also have a question for audience members. So we would like you to go into the Q&A box and answer this question. So before we move into Q&A, we'd love to hear from you. Of course, we want to hear as much as you have to share today. But what's one way you talk about saving for the future with the families or communities that you work with? So we're going to invite you to drop your responses to this question in the Q&A, and we're going to move into our audience questions. And so you sparked a lot of interest, and we have a lot of questions here for you, Ikram, today. So first, I'm going to ask a question from Chrissy. Do you offer options for families to make early withdrawals from the account for pre-college or other education-related programs?
Yeah, great question. So the way that we've set up our withdrawal policy is that families are only able to withdraw on any deposits that they make. And so they wouldn't be able to make any early withdrawals on any of the program C deposits or program bonuses that they earn. And even with that, basically they have to go through the process of letting us know. And a big part of that is so that we can help them connect to like resources in the community because we have partners, we have people that we work with, and so we want that to kind of be a last resort if it's in the case of an emergency. And then in the case of other educational aspects, like it is more so for, post-secondary education, so anything after high school. And so far we have not had any families that have requested withdrawals.
Yeah, that's great. And you talked a little bit about the wraparound services and how you help families in all other areas as well. So it seems like that's also a support to ensure that that's the last resort. So with all the money contributed can go to the young person's post-secondary efforts. Um, so we have another question. So are the 17K babies enrolled in the program account, are those that have been registered by parents, or are those just accounts that have been created by the program?
So those are the accounts that have been created by the program. And the last time I checked on the data, it was over 65% of the account holders had engaged in some shape or form. So log into the savings portal, making a deposit, and then, taking advantage of some of those empowerment bonuses, which actually require families to like have to go take action, go participate in some type of programming and services and like consistently with our quarterly deposit days and also through other events that we have like we are always having additional families that are beginning to engage with the program every single day.
Okay. And another question is, what does the opt-out process look like? And I'm going to also add on to this. So, what does your opt-out process look like? And for those who either have opted out or are not registered, are there efforts to re-engage those parents or families in the program?
Yeah, definitely. So for opt out, the way that it works is when we send the welcome kits home, to the families, there is a form that they can fill out to opt out of the program.
Mhm.
And to date, we haven't had too many, I think like less than 2015. And then with that too, a lot of times if a family does it, usually it's because they're like, oh, I had already opened a savings account for my child, or
Mhm.
I have a 529. And so it's going to be hard to kind of keep track of all of it. And we also do have families that have other vehicles and they choose to keep this one as well. So that's kind of the process. And then in terms of, the re-engaging, if a family opts out, there's not really like a process in
Mhm.
place for re-engaging them, but for families that are newer and aren't a part of the program yet, that's where a lot of our community ambassadors and partners come in and all of the different things that we do as a way to help, capture those families and getting them enrolled. And then our school partnerships has also been a key part of that, right? Where we have a bunch of students in pre-K now that maybe haven't been a part of our program because their family moved to the city after, so they weren't here at birth, and so we're able to, play catch up and get them enrolled now.
Mhm. Okay. And we have a more technical question. So, it looks like someone has like an active program and they're just trying to pick your brain. So, they said, are you getting data as it relates to race, gender, ethnicity, free/reduced lunch? They stated that they aren't having much luck getting these types of data in place. It says much luck with FERPA. So, how are you getting your data from program participants? What does that process look like? And what other places and spaces can you go to consult on data collection?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, we get data in a number of different ways. And so some of the data that we get kind of varies, but the data that we get from the Minnesota Department of Health of the birth records, we don't get demographic data from that, but we do get where parents are born because we have an equity bonus. So this is why the demographic data is important because we have an equity bonus for participants that are from, communities that have been historically under-resourced. We give them the equity bonus and we use the data that we have. And so we do get parents' place of birth, but with other data that we get, such as through our partners like WIC or other community partners, we do get demographic data and also through the enrollment forms that we have on our websites and through paper forms. And so we do have demographic data. Sometimes it varies in the ways that it shows up. Sometimes we get specific cultural group that they're from versus just general, race or ethnicity. And then, like I said, we use that for our equity bonus. But I think there's always desire to get more data. And then from the schools, now that we have that partnership, we do get some data, but not too
Mhm.
much just because you know how schools are. Like they're very protective of data, which,
Mhm.
is all for a good cause.
Okay. And are you finding that deposits decrease as participants age? And what are suggestions on items to do as these participants do get older in your program?
Yeah, I would say that deposits are increasing as the participants are getting older. And so that's kind of what we're seeing, which makes sense, right? When you think about a
Yeah.
baby, like babies, I mean, kids are expensive in general, but babies, like there's so many expenses that families have to cover, and so they might not have as much, to contribute to their accounts, but as they're getting older, we are seeing an increase in
Mhm.
that. And then can you say the last part of the question
Um,
again?
so let me go back to it. Yeah, so how are you engaging like young people as they get older, right? Because when you're
Yes.
younger, you go where your parents go.
Yes.
I have two littles, but what does that look like as young people get older? How do you keep them
Yes.
rooted in the program and engaged?
Definitely. And so that's one of the things that I'm actually most excited about to like as we see the program grow is that initially in the first few years, our primary communication was with the families, the parents and caregivers because they were babies and toddlers, right? But now that they're school age, we have an opportunity to actually directly engage with them in a way that is like deeper than we've been able to do before. And so there's integration of, college bound and also financial education within the schools and their classrooms, which are provided by the school counselors. They are doing in school deposit days where they're like, I'm going to, my CollegeBound bank, and they actually physically get to like make a deposit. And so that's really great. And then as they get older, the elementary program really kind of gets into like building that relationship with the young ones, because now we can do that and
Mhm.
thinking about and planning for their future and letting them know that. And I know you're thinking, well, how do you talk about that to like a pre-K student or a kindergarten student? But educators have a way to do it. Like when I went
Mhm.
to the school deposit days, like it was so amazing the way that they were talking about savings to like these 4 and 5 year olds. And
Yeah.
so I think that's actually one of the most exciting parts of the program, to see that first interaction with the youth themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a little tidbit, when young people first turn two and start to say no, we say that those are the terrible twos, right? But when a young person can say no, that means that their need for independence begins to grow, and it's going to continue to grow stronger and stronger the closer that they get to adulthood. And so the idea that they're as they get older, you have a larger opportunity for engaging that need for independence and say so in what their life looks like post 18. So I'm really excited to see how this program grows and how your young people grow in independence as they continue to engage your program. And we have so many questions. Ikram, you are really bringing out the engagement today. So I'm going to ask one more question before we move into our next steps. So you briefly mentioned this, but can you elaborate a little bit more on your state's 529 program integration with your CSA program? And they asked, do you partner or educate families about 529 options to help them continue growing their savings once they've built a foundation?
Yeah, great question. In the early stages when we were talking about, our key values, accessibility was a really big thing. So in choosing the account vehicle, there were endless conversations about custodial savings account or a 529. And we talked to the 529 folks and, learned as much as possible. But essentially, our program is a custodial savings account. So the city's the custodian, the children are named beneficiary. It doesn't impact any benefits that families may get because it doesn't, count against it doesn't count as income and things of that sort. So there's a number of that, right? And then also with a custodial savings account, we're not requiring Social Security or I-10. And so all of our community members are going to be able to participate. Whereas with the 529, there's also a little bit of barrier around that. So our program currently is not integrated with the 529. It is simply a custodial savings account, but we do let families know that if they are interested in a higher yielding interest account, such as a 529 or something different, that we can help them get into that, right? Because the first foundational piece is like we have a lot of families that are unbanked and underbanked. So we want to be able to build a foundation, but that is something that we make available for families as they are interested. And so I think over time we're going to be able to see more and more of that. But we do at least educate them about it. And like I said, we do have some families that, will open a 529 as well, but also want to keep this
Mhm.
because of all the engagement and wraparound aspects that it brings.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like you've built, like, not only have you engaged the community, but you've built a community around this program, and the wraparound aspect is even more of an incentive for families to not only be involved but share the word. So Ikram, I am so sad that this conversation is coming to an end because I want to pick your brain a little bit more, and we still have some audience questions coming in. But we want to thank you again for joining us today and sharing a bit more about the great work that your organization is doing, but also just your approach to this great work. It's very clear your passion and integrity and all of your personal characteristics that go into making this work a success. And I think people across the CSA field can really relate to how you view this work and how much you value this work. Loved hearing about the community-centered aspect of everything that you're doing. And I think the audience agrees because we have a whole bunch of hearts coming up for you. And so I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our learning opportunity. Next steps, we want you to visit our website to stay up to date about around all the great work that we're doing in here. We want also invite you to connect with Ikram and continue the conversation. Yes, yes, please. And continue to kind of have that thought partnership and peer learning together as we all work together to create a system that supports CSAs. We encourage you to sign up for our networks to stay in the know about issues you care about. And we want you to let us know your suggestions for future calls. So after today's webinar, a survey will come up. If you tell us that you want more of this, we will provide more of this and ensure that you have all of the learning opportunities available to you to support your work and your causes. But Ikram, thank you so much for joining us today. I learned so much and truly enjoyed my time with you.
Of course, thank you so much for inviting me. Great conversation, and just want to let others know that I'm happy to answer any questions or talk through anything, or provide more clarity on anything that I said today. So feel free to reach out, please.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.